Some of your favorite celebrities are kind of black and you didn't even know it. Here are some celebrities with black or African ancestry. I know you didn't expect this one, but yes, Halsey is African American. Her father is African American and her mother is Italian. She has always struggled with connecting to her black identity publicly because she is mixed, and in popular media she's considered white passing. She doesn't have many of the race-specific experiences of her fellow African American family members because of the way she looks. She's so white passing that every time she talks about her identity and how it affects her, she gets criticized by people who don't believe that those are her actual roots. In an interview, she says, "I am in pain for my family, but nobody is going to kill me based on my skin color. I've always been proud of who I am, but it'd be an absolute disservice to say we when I'm not susceptible to the same violence." Zendaya's mother is white and her father is black. At a BeautyCon festival in 2018, she described herself as the industry's acceptable version of a black girl. She believes that because she's biracial and light-skinned with looser curly hair, she's benefited from Hollywood beauty standards and colorism in the industry. Discovering this whilst basically growing up on Disney Channel often put her at odds with her black identity. She feels that in a lot of the roles she plays, she was meant to look black, but not really be black in any way that influenced how the character she played developed or acted. Zendaya has some pretty astute opinions on race identification and perception in America. When she was 19, she told Hunger magazine that the only people who are Native American, and no one is just white and no one is just black. When asked about race in America, statistically speaking, almost 60% of African Americans have at least one non-black grandparent. Being thrust into the industry, she learned pretty quickly how to be confident about her identity. Fei Fei is half Chinese and half black. She struggled with her identity as in China, the beauty standard of most popular media was having very pale skin. Her talent was undeniable, and her identity was used as sort of a gimmick for the industry to draw attention from viewers. Over time, she established herself in the idol and pop culture scene as a capable dancer, singer, and fashionista. It requires quite a lot of resilience to withstand the sort of comments that she had to take to get to where she is in the industry today. A lot of Chinese people were rude to her about her skin tone and African roots and didn't want to accept her, no matter how talented she was. She had quite a lot of hate comments at the peak of her international popularity, but persisted despite it all. Now she aims to be an example of confidence and self-acceptance for the very small but present population of other mixed Chinese kids who struggled in the same way she did. In 2018, Lisa Bonet did a Metro interview in which she confessed that she felt like she was a misfit while growing up because she was mixed race. Lisa was born in 1967, so she was a biracial teen in the 1980s, and that made for a complicated childhood, even though most people would consider her African American. It was the 80s, and people back then still had a pretty strong bias towards biracial people. Her father, Alan Bonet, is African American, and her mother, Arlene, is Jewish American. Looking back over her years acting on The Cosby Show in the 80s, she said, "The world wasn't ready for what I represented, the merging of these two races." Lisa Bonet is mixed, having different ancestry on either side of her family, but as she gets older, she identifies more and more with her blackness. She went on to say, "I went to private schools full of white kids. I think a lot of that made me want to blend in, or not be looked at as black. The white kids are always talking about your hair and making you feel weird. I had this struggle of accepting myself as black and loving that part of myself. And now I'm so in love with my culture and so proud to be black." If you love hearing about stars who are black and proud and switching up the Hollywood industry, click the subscribe button and notification bell, and I'll keep them coming. She may seem like a confident supermodel who knows her worth, but growing up, Kimora was pretty insecure and often felt like a bit of a misfit. She was a loner in early childhood. As a mixed girl with a Korean-Japanese mother and African-American father, she felt that no one else was like her and couldn't relate to her experiences, which caused her to shut herself in most of the time. She was also much taller than most of the girls in her class, being 6 feet but just 11 years old. Everything about her was a source of ridicule to other kids. Her hair was different, her eyes, her skin, her height, her family. She felt ashamed of almost every aspect of herself. Children can be pretty cruel when they're not taught how to engage with and be kind about differences among them. Kimora experienced the worst of this, as the kids at her school would call her Asian slurs and leave her crying on most days. Her only saving grace was her mother. Her mother instilled in her the strength to accept her unique background and traits. Kimora practices the same thing with her own children, teaching them how to be respectful towards others, whilst also valuing themselves in every way. Dwayne identifies as both Black and Samoan, with his mother being Samoan and his father being Black Canadian. When he was winning titles in wrestling, people assumed that he identified as Samoan since he never gave himself the title of Black in any of his wins. Dwayne responded to this assumption by explaining that he transcended race in the wrestling world, so he wasn't booked in any way that pertained to his race. At first, Dwayne's ambiguity in the wrestling world upset quite a lot of people. Over time, people appreciated his talents as a wrestler and stopped worrying about what the color of his skin meant. He followed in the footsteps of his African-American father in the industry and wanted to win the titles because of his talent without any labels to put his achievements in a box. In Japan, when someone is half Japanese and half another nationality, they call you a hafu. This title can make for a pretty isolating experience when growing up, especially when you're the sort of person who doesn't even particularly want to stand out but is forced to at a young age because of something you don't control. In her childhood, whenever the teacher told the children in class to hold hands, they would tease her and ask her not to touch them in case the color rubbed off on them. They asked her not to swim in the pool with them and called her racist slurs, and she recalls having garbage thrown at her by fellow students. One of her only friends, who was also mixed, committed suicide after facing the same harassment as her for years, and this had devastating effects on her mental health. Well, Ariana took that chance to stand out and made bank on it. With her mother's encouragement, she joined a pageantry contest and in 2015 was crowned Miss Universe Japan and made it to the top 10 of the International Miss Universe contest. Despite her wins, she still had to explain to a lot of Japanese people that she was in fact Japanese and a citizen of the country. Logic has admitted that his features made him kind of a random card growing up. When he tells people he's biracial or African American, some respond by accepting him as just a super light-skinned black person, and others believe that he didn't count because he was too white passing. His mother is white and his father is black. It's become a bit of a running joke that Logic loves talking about being biracial, but he says he does this because he's proud of his black roots. He feels like mainstream media was pressuring him to identify with only one side of his family. Instead, he chooses to be vocal about how being biracial specifically has defined and affected his experiences in life. He talks about his experiences of being biracial often in his albums, especially in the album Everybody, where he has a song specifically dedicated to his struggle with self-identity. In his song Africarian, he talks about how he feels unaccepted or even hated by both sides of his family and could never feel confident enough to identify with either side of his heritage. Zoe Kravitz is the daughter of Lisa Bonet and Lenny Kravitz. With her mom being mixed and her dad being mixed too, Zoe had a unique and multi-ethnic background and upbringing. Lisa would tell stories about being a biracial woman in the 1970s, being spit on and abused by the public. However, Lisa never took the chance to warn her own daughter about any directed hatred or prejudice that Zoe would experience herself. Perhaps she assumed that times had changed. In some ways they have, and in others, things have stayed exactly the same. From the moment Zoe stepped into the public eye, people have been making her feel uncomfortable about her mixed background. In an interview with The Independent, she said, "I felt really insecure about my hair, relaxing it, putting chemicals in it, plucking my eyebrows really thin. I was uncomfortable with my blackness. It took me a long time to not only accept it, but to love it and want to scream it from the rooftops." Her mother has been at her side for her entire struggle, but allowed Zoe to go out into the world and experience the tribulation of it by herself, and build her own systems of self-acceptance and identity in the world. Hallie identifies entirely as a black woman, despite being told that she's probably less than half African American. Growing up, she identified mostly as mixed race because it made it easier for people to accept her with the way she looked. When she entered the industry, she felt forced to choose to identify as either white or black. She described growing up as mixed, knowing only the heritage of her white mother, and knowing little to nothing about her father, as painful and confusing. Click on this video to learn more about your favorite Black Hollywood stars. Who didn't you expect to be on this list?